Hello boys and girls. So as you can see, I'm back from Hong Kong, and contrary to my earlier statement, I did end up spending some money in Hong Kong and China. So I thought I'd make a little video to show you my audio haul from Hong Kong. So let's get started. So let's move on to earphones, because I actually got two pairs of earphones in Hong Kong and I wanted to give you some brief impressions of them. So the first earphone that I'll talk about is this pair, and hopefully the camera is focusing on these and not my face, and if that's not happening then we'll have to cut to B-roll. But these are the AZLA Horizons, and AZLA is as far as I can tell, Korean or Japanese company. These were made in Korea. Almost a year ago, I tried the earlier versions of these earphones, or at least the earlier versions of these earphones with an earlier version of this driver from AZLA, and I found them quite interesting, but they were really large and didn't fit in my ear. Whereas the Horizon, again, a model which has just come out, which I can only get in Hong Kong, has a smaller earpiece, so I decided I'd give it a go. So the unique selling point, I suppose, for the AZLA Horizons is that they use a dynamic driver with a slightly different magnet structure. So usually the diaphragm, usually in a dynamic driver, there's the diaphragm and the magnet is behind the diaphragm driving the magnet. With these ones, apparently the diaphragm is enclosed within this magnet structure. I don't know, I just bought these because I think they sound kind of unique. It's really quite a neutral, dry listen, and then at the very end of the bass register there's a sudden hike up in the sub bass, almost like the Etymotic ER4XR, but not quite as controlled in that regard. So there's almost no mid bass bleed in this earphone, which is sort of unique for a dynamic driver with this much bass, because it is quite a lot of lower bass that comes out of nowhere on some tracks. And then you have a very dry, almost a little bordering on harsh kind of upper mid-range, almost like the VSonic GR07 when I had that. And it's an interesting combination. I haven't owned anything quite like it, and that's why I decided to pick it up. The one thing I'm not very happy about with these earphones is that soon after getting them, I wasn't very happy with the way the cable is a bit stiff and it retains memory, and it's sort of like, it's sort of nice in that audiophile way of having this double braid, but honestly, practically speaking, it's a bit heavy and it's not as nice as I would hope. So I decided to try seeing if I could get a replacement cable for it in Hong Kong. And it uses Nmc X connectors, and as soon as I disconnected and connected the Nmc X connectors a few times, it's already starting to develop dropouts. You know, whenever the cable rotates, and I've tried blowing out dust and blah blah blah. Nmc X is a terrible connection standard on the best of days. I really urge you, if you have I really urge you, if you have Nmc X earphones, don't disconnect them under any circumstances unless you absolutely have to. Speaking of replacement cables, I also got a pair of these. These are the Final Audio E4000s, and along with the new E5000s, they have detachable Nmc X connectors. And I honestly bought these earphones because I was thinking of borrowing this nice Nmc X cable from them. Because honestly speaking, for the 1080 Hong Kong dollars I paid for these earphones, that would be the cost of a cheap replacement Nmc X connector cable in Hong Kong, which is how crazy these things are. And this way I actually got a pair of earphones along with it. But after listening to the E4000 for a bit, I've decided, I'm going to stick with these as the daily driver to replace my E2000s, just to have something in the bag. And I want to give you some more detailed comparisons between this and the E2000, but I'll say right off the bat, these have more bass than the E2000. It's not in a way that's super gross, in that it overwhelms the rest of the signature, but it doesn't quite have that balanced sound that the E2000 has. But it's still pretty nice, and the lower bass really helps when I'm catching the train, because it overcomes some of the rumble from the train tracks. I actually prefer the E5000 more when I listen to it because it has a bit more high frequency boost, a bit more details in the highs, particularly with strings and vocals. But I didn't really like the stiffness of the cable on the E5000 because it has, again, that kind of fancy audiophile stiffness syndrome. And it cost quite a bit more as well. So I decided to go with the less flashy E4000. I've been pretty happy with them so far. So lastly, I'll show you the piece de resistance of my travels. This is something that I bought in China and that you could only buy in China. It's this. And you're thinking, Lachlan, this looks just like a ZX300, but oh no, it's not a ZX300. This is the China exclusive model, the ZX300A. And the difference between the standard ZX300, which costs $799 Australian dollars, and this model, which cost me equivalent to about 511 Australian dollars, is that this model has 16 gigabytes of onboard storage as opposed to 64 gigabytes. And that's the only difference as far as people know. And ever since I played around with a ZX300 at Minidisc, it inspired a real Maria Kondo sense of joy in my hand because of the kind of nice form factor and the shape and the weight of this media player. And so when I discovered that you could buy a cheaper variant of this, only in China for some reason, but when I discovered that you could get it, I decided to schlep around Shenzhen for a few hours to find this model. And honestly, I wish I could have shown you some video of Shenzhen, but at the time I was stressed out of my mind. But Shenzhen is bewildering because it's full of electronics hypermarkets where you have no idea if the stuff is legit or not. But we managed to find this in an electronics department store and it seemed right and it hasn't fallen apart, so I assume this is the genuine article. So the ZX300A is going to be my media player, portable media player going forward. It's going to replace my Sony A45, but it's also going to replace my Astel and Kern Khan, which I was using as a sort of transportable desktop setup. And I have discovered over time with the Khan that it's not actually ideal for use in that regard as a desktop setup, because I have a tendency, at least I do, to accidentally pull the Khan right off the table with the headphone cable alongside it, and then the Khan with its incredible crushing weight will bend the headphone cable and it will mean that I will need to get replacement cables, and this has already happened twice. So I've decided that the Khan is not for me, and this is the new best friend that I'm going to use. And I've also realized that having OTG cable means that in the situations where I can't get enough power output to get a listenable volume with the ZX300, I can always plug it in into an external amplifier if I'm demoing stuff in an audio store. So I'm not particularly worried about that. It's sort of like power deficit compared to the Khan. It's got the standard 3.5 millimeter and the 4.4 millimeter balanced, which I haven't used. This has quadrupled the power output, but I don't have a single balanced headphone on me at the moment, and I don't have 4.4 adapters, blah, 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 blah. But so far I've been really happy with this, and I've been using this on the train on the way to my new job, which I will let you know about in eventually, winky face. I also got this is the official Sony flip case. Now, a lot of people have said that the flip case is sort of annoying, but I actually like it because it's fairly protective of the unit on all sides, and it stops me from mindlessly fiddling and changing tracks because the flip case will protect the screen, and it means I don't use a screen protector. And I'll say honestly, every single time I open it, it makes it feel like changing tracks or choosing music is a bit like an event. And I think people who are into vinyl have a similar sort of feeling, or when you use mini discs, just to have that kind of mechanical interaction. It's a nice little touch for me. I know a lot of you are probably rolling your eyes, but anyway, I like this thing. It brings me joy, so that's cool. So those are the things that I picked up in Hong Kong. Now, I've got to say that in general, Hong Kong isn't cheaper for electronics like it used to be compared to Sydney. But there are a few things that you just can't find in Sydney, and that's what I've tried to pick up while I was in Hong Kong. Let me know what the personal audio market is like in your country, because I've heard all sorts of things from different places. And yeah, happy listening.